Hello, Alyssa here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have my Leuchtturm 1917 in A5. It's the older one, so this is the one in black. And today I'm going to do a video on how the Leuchtturm takes watercolors. So I have my watercolors here. They are the Sakura Koi Watercolors. It's the 12 pack. They also come in other ones like 24, 36, maybe 48. So far I really like these. They're the first watercolors I've actually had, so I don't have much experience with them. But for example, I painted this earlier this week. I followed a tutorial by Ekaterina Smirnova, which I'll link below. She's really good. But what I did to kind of change things up was I put down some washi tape, and then I kind of painted the picture around it and then pulled up the washi tape to kind of see if this would work. I've been really enjoying the watercolors lately, so I want to make sure that when I start my fresh notebook in January, I have a notebook that's going to take watercolors well. So this is the first video, and this one is just focused on the Leuchtturm 1917. So from my preliminary test, I noticed that there is a bit of wrinkling. I don't know how well this will come across in the video, but you can see the page is not flat anymore. It's significantly wrinkled. Having the book closed for a few days and then opening it back up did flatten it out a little more. But if wrinkling is something that's going to bother you, watercoloring in the Leuchtturm is probably not for you. So for this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make watercolor paintings on both sides of the same page. So one on this side, one on this side, and see how they look if one goes really bad or if it bleeds through. I did not get any bleeding with my test page, so I don't expect it to bleed, but we'll see if that happens when I paint on both sides of the paper. And then on this page, I'm just gonna do some wet on dry to kind of show how bad the wrinkling is when you don't use quite so much water. So let's get started. Okay, I'm back with my finished watercoloring. Unfortunately, when I did these little shapes, the wet on dry, so no wash went down on this, just a little bit of paint, a little bit of water. When I did this, the camera errored again. So I'm gonna have to have a look at that. Luckily, I got most of the rest of my watercoloring, so I'm gonna probably not redo it and just kind of talk about what I did. Some of these little paintings had multiple layers of paint. Some of them just had one layer of paint. Some of them I left a little white space in between, and some of them I didn't. Some of them were darker or less diluted. And so if we turn the page, we can see we have a little bit of ghosting and no bleed through that I can see. Let me lift this up. Better look here so you can see there's some ghosting right there. But for the most part, it's fine. It's a little wrinkled, but not nearly as bad as when I did the full page paintings. If we go look at those, here's my second one I did. I did a wash gradient from blue to gray, and then I just added these lines for decoration over the top of it. On this page, I did a wash from pink to purple, and it looks brighter to me in person than it does on camera, but I did want to kind of keep the center of the spread lighter, just so if I want to write on here, these are just test pages, but for the most part I'm going to be writing in my bullet journal, so I want the middle to be lighter, and so the ink of my pen doesn't get kind of crowded out by all of the colors and shapes. And this is just kind of an abstract, some triangles, some circles, just a little design I doodled. And so ultimately, I think the Leuchtturm works pretty well for watercolors. I do have one final test I'm gonna do, and that is I'm gonna close the notebook overnight and leave something really heavy on top of it, so like a great big old textbook or maybe like a pot of water or something. And then I'm gonna see if it kind of flattens out these pages a little bit more. I'm not sure if this wrinkling would bother me in like if I was regularly doing watercolors on my bullet journal, but I do really like this. I like the freedom of being able to have any kind of backgrounds I want and being able to switch up the backgrounds from page to page. And I don't know, I held up the notebook earlier, but there's almost no ghosting once you have paint on both sides, just because the paint on this side kind of covers it up. Like I can see one of the circles poking through right there, just barely, but for the most part, the watercolors are working really well here. And on this side, part of my reasoning for these dark lines was so I could see them if they are ghosting pretty bad, so we can kind of see one there. I'm not even sure if it's dark enough to show up on camera. But I would say, if you can get over the wrinkling, the Leuchtturm 1917 is a decent notebook to do watercolors in. Okay, I'm back. I've left this book out overnight with a bunch of other books stacked on top of it. So now we're going to see if that helped with the wrinkling at all. Opening this up, I don't notice significant wrinkling like I did yesterday. That could have just been having the notebook closed. I don't know if the books made a huge difference there. This page, which was the page I had watercolored a week and a half ago, still has pretty crazy wrinkling on the back side of it. But the pages themselves are fairly flat. I do worry that with a full notebook full of watercolored pages, this would get really chunky and wavy, and I don't know if I'd like that. I know that some people kind of like the artsy look that gives the notebook. So really it's up to you to decide. My next step here is going to be to test different pens out on the watercolored pages and see if watercoloring makes any significant difference to how the pens do or don't bleed through the page. So we'll get started on that. The first pen I have for you is my current favorite pen, the Tombow Fudenosuke pen. It is my first brush pen, and I'm having so much fun making beautiful headers and just adding a level of decoration to all my pages. So that's what I'm going to start off with here. Despite having thick black ink, the Tombow Fudenosuke ghosted a tiny bit, but it did not bleed through the paper at all. If you are turning the page, you can kind of see it show through a little bit, but that's mostly because the light is shining through from the other side. Now I'm going to test the Staedtler Tri Plus Fineliners. These are the pens that I use for most of my daily writing, so not as much the decoration, but the actual writing down tasks and things like that. Turning the page, you can see what I was talking about with the light shining through. The ghosting is really apparent when the light is shining through the page, but once you lay the page down flat, the ghosting is hardly noticeable. Even in some of these places where I scribbled down blocks of color, it's still barely visible through the watercolor paper. The next pens on my list are the Pilot G2 gel pens. These are some of my favorite pens just because they have such a deep color of ink. The problem is that they do smear pretty easily, and being left-handed, it's kind of a problem for me. For the Pilot G2s, even the light shining through the paper is barely enough to show the ink through the page, so these are particularly good. And also, just the quality of the Leuchtturm paper makes all of these pens a good choice on the watercolored paper or just the blank paper. Next, we have everyone's favorite fineliner, the Sakura Micron. I have it in 03 and 005. I don't use these very often because I like my pens to be really dark and thick, but I do use them sometimes, and I know a lot of other people really enjoy them. Much like the Pilot G2, the Micron is only just visible through the page when the light's shining through it. When you flatten it out, you cannot see it at all. So it looks like the Staedtler Fineliners were the inkiest with the most ghosting, and then these other two pens are better if you really don't like the ghosting. Next is another fan favorite, the Zebra Mildliners. I use these all the time. They're one of my favorite pens. I love the colors. I have 3 different packs of them. The Mildliners also do not bleed through the paper. In some places, I even did multiple layers of ink and it still did not show through. Again, when the light shines through, you can see them a little bit, but that's to be expected at this point. The penultimate pen that I'm testing today is the Uni-Ball Signo white gel pen. This one is mostly for fun. I just got it and I love seeing the different kinds of decorations I can make with the white on darker colors. So this one I doubt anyone's going to be using regularly, but it's still fun to see. The white does not show up super well on the lighter colors, but I kind of got a cool effect on the darker colors. And this you cannot even see when the light is shining through the page, probably because the pen is white, but you can get some really cool effects by using dark watercolors with the Uni-Ball Signo over the top. And finally, the last pen is actually a fountain pen. It is a Pilot Metropolitan, and I have it stocked up with some coral colored ink. I think it's Lamy brand. I will link it down below. This is one of my favorite pens because of the color and because of the thick letters that I can get with this medium nib pen. Unfortunately, I don't use it very often, just because the color is a little bit, it kind of clashes with some of the other colors I like to use on my spreads. There's an example of how the ink looks on regular paper, and then I will test it on the watercolor paper. Just to really get some tests going here, I did 1 layer, 2 layers, and 3 layers of ink in these little squares here. And you can see the 3-layer does ghost pretty bad, but the ink does not bleed through the page. If I tilt it, you can kind of see any bleed through would still show even when the light wasn't shining in the right way. So really, I think we can conclude that the watercolors don't affect the quality of the Leuchtturm 1917 paper at all. All of these pens work really well on the blank paper, and all of them still work really well once I've watercolored the entire page. Here's one final look at all the pens I tested today. I will link all of them in the description box below. And I hope you really enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I will catch you next time. Thank you.